The wealthy get to borrow money and never pay it back. In the past, there was a huge barrier to entry to being able to take advantage of this financial loophole, but now anybody can do this with any amount of money. And in this video, I want to explain to you what exactly I mean by this. Let's get started. The US national debt reached $38 trillion dollars in the last few days. And I guarantee you that this number is going to continue to go up literally forever. It's never going to stop going up because the US government has a blank check and they can borrow literally as much money as they want to. The biggest problem with this is that they're not planning to create more value to pay it back. They're just using the assets that they have to take on more loans to pay back these loans. So they're using a credit card to pay back another credit card because they know that the interest rate on the credit card that they're going to use to pay back this loan isn't high enough for them to be concerned. Here's what I mean by this. So Cynthia Lummis proposed a plan to reduce the US national debt by half. So she's saying that we can cut this debt, or the US can cut this debt in half to 19 trillion, let's say, just as an example. She's saying that it can be cut in half by selling some of the Federal Reserve's gold reserves to buy Bitcoin. What she's actually saying is that they're going to revalue the gold. The current price of the gold that the US government has is $42.22 per ounce. They're going to revalue this to the current price, which is $4,100 or so. Gold has had a massive run up, and they're just going to borrow against those gold certificates. They're not actually going to give away those gold certificates. So the wealthy, in this case, the US government, or really anybody else who understands this, can use the assets that they have. They get to use those as collateral, and then they get to take cash out of the system while debasing everybody else's savings. And then they get to enjoy their lives at the same time, so today, while also having the asset for the future. They've found a loophole to allow them to delay gratification and get instant gratification at the same time. Who is this at the expense of? This is at the expense of anybody who saves in dollars. If you hold on to dollars, then you're the one who's being hit by this. You're the one who's being hurt by this because the savings that you have are going to constantly be decreasing in value. I recently read this book, Layered Money, highly recommended. It's really great for explaining to you how the financial system is built. It's built in layers. And one of the important takeaways that I got from this book is that in the current system, we use houses, we use stocks, we use real estate, we use government bonds, we use gold, all that stuff as collateral. So the people who own them can keep them for as long as they want to. And at the same time, banks can create more and more liabilities against those assets, and those liabilities are dollars. I think in the beginning of my journey of learning finance and understanding Bitcoin, it was really difficult for me to embrace this concept of dollars are borrowed into existence. What that means is that dollars are debt. The current financial system needs as much collateral as possible in order to print more dollars. And this is how they avoid deflation. This is how they create inflation. They keep creating more and more dollars against a limited amount of assets. And because those dollars can be printed into existence and we value those assets in dollars, the value of those assets keeps going up, and the wealthy can keep borrowing more and more money against those assets forever in perpetuity. And they never have to pay back the money because the interest rates on the debt that they have is intentionally kept low so that they can keep borrowing more and more and more. It's an incentive system for them to borrow more money. The thing here that should concern you is that there's a limited number of assets and there's no limit to the amount of dollars that can exist. So the people who own those assets can keep increasing their value, they can keep increasing their wealth, and they can keep increasing what they buy with that money, and they don't have to think about the opportunity cost. While the people who save in dollars, the unit of currency that's used to value those assets, keeps decreasing in value over time. So if you save in those dollars, you're going to keep losing value compared to those assets that the wealthy have. This is why we see the S&P 500's price continuing to go up forever, because the S&P 500 is rigged to go up forever. It's designed to go up forever. There are a limited number of shares of the S&P 500. The wealthy can use margin loans to borrow against the S&P 500, and they can spend those dollars that they get in terms of the loan to pay for their lifestyle today. The same thing applies to real estate. The people who own real estate can borrow more and more money against their real estate, and they can keep buying more and more real estate if they want to, or they can pay for their expenses on that real estate if they need to, and they never have to work again. The same applies to government bonds. These bonds are mostly held by, let's say, banks and institutions. what these banks and institutions can do is they can use the bonds that they own, the asset that they own, and they can keep earning interest. And then they can use those bonds as collateral to borrow cash so they never have to sell those bonds. They get to hold on to those bonds forever. And again, like I said, the number of assets in the system is limited because it takes time to produce those assets, aside from, let's say, bonds. Bonds can be printed forever. That's what you saw with the US national debt. More and more bonds will be created. But again, that's a loophole that the wealthy have. They can borrow against those bonds and they never have to give them away. They get to keep them forever, and then they get to enjoy their lives at the same time today. So let me give you an example of what I mean here. If you have a house, you can use it as collateral. You have, let's say, one house. It's worth $500,000. You can take on a loan of 80% against that house. You can go to the bank will assess the house, and they'll give you 80% of the value of that house in cash. So today, let's say you want to take on a loan with an LTV, a loan to value of 80% against that house, you can borrow $400,000 and pay whatever the market interest rate is. Let's say it's 6%. You can borrow that $400,000, pay 6%, and then let's say if you wanted to buy the S&P 500, you can get a 10, 12, 13% return. So your benefit here would be the difference between the 6% that you pay for the mortgage or the loan against the house versus the return that you get on the stocks. So if you get a 13% return on the stocks and you get a 6% mortgage loan, the difference would be 7%. So you get 7% for free for doing nothing, for literally just holding onto a house and borrowing against that house to buy stocks. You get 7% for free. And then on top of that, you can use that house as a rental property. So you can rent it to people and they'll give you more cash flow. So your returns on that house have multiplied. But again, this is because of the leverage in the system. This is because of the debt that this system allows you to take on. So let's say the value of the house goes to $1 million. You initially started with a loan of 400,000. You pay off $100,000 of that loan. You have, let's say, $100,000 in equity in that house. So you put down 20%. Then over the years, you paid off $100,000 of that house. You only bought $200,000 worth of that house. But now the value of the house has gone up. It's gone up by 500,000. So you initially bought the house for 500,000. You put a down payment of 100,000. You paid off $100,000 worth of that loan, and now the price of that house went to $1 million. So it went from 500K to $1 million. Now you can take on a loan because you have equity in that house. You can take on a loan of 80% of the equity that you have in that house. So you would have gone from in the beginning, you would have gone from a $400,000 loan. So you started with a $400,000 loan to buy the house, the mortgage in the first place. Then you can add on additional debt because the value of the house has gone up, because more dollars have been created and added to the system. So technically, if somebody buys a house and house prices just keep going up, and they probably will because dollars are worthless, they never have to pay back the loan that they take on. The reason why the layered money financial system is so broken is because it leads to a class of people who have assets and they never have to work, and it leads to another class of people who don't have assets and they literally work forever. They have to keep working forever. There's no choice there. They don't have the opportunity to stop working because they don't own assets. And again, the root cause of this is that the US dollar can be printed into existence. You can create more dollars at will. Nobody can stop that from happening. So in this example, you started with $100,000. Of course, it's hard to get to $100,000, but you started with $100,000. You bought an asset worth $500,000. The value of that asset appreciated to $1 million. It took some time, of course. You can now borrow against that asset and you can buy more assets. You can keep doing this over and over and over again until you own a bunch of houses and you own a bunch of stocks. And you literally never have to give them away again because the stocks are going to create dividends. They're going to pay you in those dividends, and then you can pay back the interest on those loans that you took on against that initial house. But now, because of how banks are operating, you can take advantage of that loophole as well, even if you don't have that initial $100,000 to buy that $500,000 home. In the past, Jamie Dimon, he's JP Morgan's CEO, has said a lot of negative things about Bitcoin and about crypto. And now they've completely changed their mind. So you can see here, Jamie Dimon lashes out against crypto. If I was the government, I'd close it down. First of all, you can't take it down. And secondly, governments have no control over Bitcoin. But take a look at the date here, December 6th, 2023. what was the price of Bitcoin at this time? You can see here that in the month of December, the high of Bitcoin was 45,000 US dollars and the low was $37,618. You can see the numbers up here. But at the time when Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan's CEO, was saying that he'd close down Bitcoin, it was only at most $45,000. But now they seem to have completely changed their mind. So this is JP Morgan's CEO saying that Bitcoin is a pet rock, it's a scam, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's whatever. Now JP Morgan is allowing Bitcoin as collateral. They're allowing people to use Bitcoin as collateral the same way that you can use real estate and stocks and bonds and every other asset that exists. You can use gold as collateral. So going back to what Cynthia Lummis proposed, she proposed that the US government is going to revalue their gold and they're going to borrow more money against that gold to pay back the debt that they had in the past. That debt that they had was uncollateralized. It has nothing backing it. It's just a debt based on trust. What the US government plans to do is they plan to buy Bitcoin with that debt that they're going to take on against the gold. So they first got the gold at, let's say, $42. They didn't even buy the gold. They got this gold from other countries, and then they said that those countries can't take it back. So they have this gold. It's currently valued at $42.22 per ounce. They borrowed a ton of money. They borrowed $38 trillion over the years. Now they're going to use this gold to borrow more money to pay back that debt that they took on over the last few decades. The reason why I'm showing you this article from JP Morgan is that this is going to probably blow everything that's been done in the past out of the water. Bitcoin is the only finite asset in the world. It can literally go to millions, billions of dollars. It can keep rising forever because it's a finite asset. The people who own Bitcoin can now start borrowing against that Bitcoin so they have an incentive to never sell it again. So they can hold on to that Bitcoin forever. They can hold on to this finite asset for as long as they want to. And then they can take on loans against this asset and they never have to pay back those loans because the value of the Bitcoin will keep rising, just like the value of the house that I showed you in that example before. They may opt to only pay back the interest on those loans and they never have to pay back the initial amount that they borrowed. You have $2 million worth of Bitcoin, you borrow $1 million against it. You now still have that Bitcoin, but you can also use that $1 million that you borrowed against that Bitcoin to buy whatever you want to. You finally have a way to take advantage of the same loophole that the wealthy get to take advantage of today. You can buy as much Bitcoin as you want to, and whenever it goes up in value, you can borrow against it. And my point here isn't that you have to borrow against your Bitcoin. My point here is that this is unlocking financial freedom for everybody. Everybody can do this. Everybody on earth can do this until fiat is no longer valued. I think that's going to take a couple of decades. Fiat currency will probably be around for a very long time. There will always be people who keep questioning Bitcoin. But if you understand Bitcoin, if you put in the time to learn about Bitcoin, you can take advantage of the system and you can use it to your own benefit. The reason why I'm so positive on Bitcoin backed loans is that it means that you never have to sell your Bitcoin again. Of course, there's going to be a lot of risk associated with the volatility of Bitcoin. Let's say you borrow against your Bitcoin, the price falls significantly. Your lender could liquidate you, and that's a problem, of course. But if the price doesn't go down and it keeps going up, then you can borrow more and more fiat against the Bitcoin that you own, and you can keep doing that literally forever because Bitcoin's price is going to go up in terms of fiat forever. The way to deal with the volatility is to not borrow too much money against your Bitcoin. So let's say you need $5,000 and you have one Bitcoin, you can potentially go to a lender who's willing to give you a 50% loan to value. You can use 10% of your stack as collateral and you can borrow fiat against that stack. So you have one Bitcoin, you use zero point 0.1 Bitcoin as collateral, you take on a $5,000 loan. And over time, as that zero point 0.1 Bitcoin keeps going up in price and it keeps going up in value, you don't have to pay back that loan. You can keep borrowing more and more against that Bitcoin to pay back the interest obligations that you have. So just to summarize what we talked about here, the wealthy have assets. They can borrow against those assets. They never have to pay back those loans that they take on against those assets because they know that the value of those assets will rise forever. The US government is using this to its advantage. It's taken on $38 trillion worth of debt, and now it's going to use the gold stores that it has to pay back part of that debt. And on top of that, it's going to use the worst money in the world, which is fiat, to buy the best money in the world. And I guarantee you, in the long term, the US government is going to use that Bitcoin to borrow even more fiat. Before, you only had the ability to use this loophole if you had a certain amount of money. Let's say you had $100,000, you can borrow money to buy a house, you can make the down payment on the house, and you can then wait for the house to appreciate in value. You can borrow more money against it. Now you can buy Bitcoin with any amount of money. You can buy a penny's worth of Bitcoin, $10 worth of Bitcoin, $100 worth of Bitcoin, whatever you can afford. You can buy any amount of Bitcoin. That Bitcoin will appreciate over time, and you can borrow any amount of dollars against that Bitcoin if you want to. I know that there are risks associated with this. Of course, Bitcoin could fall, the price could fall, and you might get liquidated. Your Bitcoin could get confiscated from you by the US government. The lender could fail. All of that is very important, and I completely agree. So don't say that I'm not talking about the risks in this video. I agree. I know that there are risks associated with this. But the point is that you don't have to use your entire stack as collateral. You use a small amount of your stack as collateral. You take advantage of this system where dollars are borrowed into existence, and you use those dollars to pay for whatever you need to pay for to maintain your lifestyle. Right now, your goal should be to stack as much Bitcoin as you possibly can so that at some point, when every bank in the world is offering the same Bitcoin backed loans that JP Morgan is proposing today, you can take advantage and you can borrow against that Bitcoin that you have, and you can pay for whatever you need to, or you can ignore all this and you can just sell some of your Bitcoin into the market. And at that point, MicroStrategy will happily buy all of the Bitcoin that you have to sell. So all you need to do today is buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can, create value for other people, stack as many Satoshis as you can, because at some point you'll be able to use that Bitcoin to unlock all this liquidity that you can use to create financial freedom for yourself. As Bitcoin's price appreciates, you can refinance your loans, you can keep refinancing them, and you literally never have to pay back your Bitcoin loans again. The banks benefit from this because all they care about is that nominal amount of money that they're getting in terms of US dollars. You benefit from this because you keep holding on to that asset that appreciates much, much faster than every other asset in the world. I'm actually going to be doing a free webinar on this topic. You can sign up for it here if you're interested. The webinar is free. Just scan the QR code with your phone, or you can use the link in the description to join it as well. So obviously the goal here is to just stack as much Bitcoin as you can, get to 1 Bitcoin if you can, get to 0.1 Bitcoin, whatever you can get to. At some point, the financial system will allow you to borrow against that Bitcoin. Of course, do this smartly. Don't use your entire stack as collateral. Use small portions of your stack. Use this to your advantage so that you can have the same lifestyle that the wealthy have and you never have to work again. This is true financial freedom. If you found value in this video and you want to learn more from me, you can watch this video here where I explain whether 1 Bitcoin will be enough to retire by 2040.